Okay, so in just a moment we'll be hearing from our guest presenter, and we've broken into 4 short sessions, and we'll pause after each session to answer your questions. So remember to get your fingers typing as soon as you've got a question to ask. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to have you along to our webinar today, where we're discussing improving the effectiveness of wild dog control. And to help us better understand what's involved, we've got Brett Carlsson from AgForce Queensland, and he's been employed in pest management roles for the past 13 years in Western Queensland. He spent 10 years living in Longreach and working across the entire region of the Lake Eyre Basin in both pest animals and also in weed management. He enjoys working with producers on their wild dog issues and helping them reduce the impact that dogs are having on their livestock. To me, he sounds like just the right person to hear from for today's webinar. So thanks for joining us, Brett. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'd just like to say thank you again for the invite along today to have a chat about wild dogs to the audience. I didn't raise my hand earlier on the survey, but this is my first webinar as well, so bear with me. John has been very helpful in the technology side of things to make this work, so bear with me and we'll run through the presentation. Just to kick off, I'd also need to obviously acknowledge my funding provider. Although employed by AgForce Queensland, it is a funded project through Australian Wool Innovation, and I'm very thankful for that contribution. Just to give everybody a bit of background, I guess, in regards to my current role and what I'm required to do, I guess, as part of my project. I'm currently working with those yellow shires you see there on the map, which are part of what they call the rapid region out in the central west of Queensland. Those 7 shires out there have been feeling the impacts of wild dogs for many, many years. There is a certain amount of frustration and I guess frustration would be a good way of describing how things are out in that central western area, especially in the sheep production areas. And obviously my role was to work with those shires, coordinate groups together, establish groups where there weren't landholder-led wild dog advisory groups, and where there were established, obviously my role is to support that and improve their functionality and obviously provide support. So I guess I did want to touch on several subjects today. Starting with impacts, we'll talk about hybridisation of the dogs and what that means to us. Just run through the existing control tools that we are currently using and how we can improve or modify those to make them work better for us. I'll briefly discuss some new tools on the horizon in regards to as much as I know about that from research agencies, and obviously I guess my little niche in the world, obviously the establishment of committees and groups and how they are really moving things forward in my project area in that Western Queensland and Southwest area as well, and how they can be an advantage to you and your fellow producers in your area. So just kicking off, I guess, on the first, and the impacts there you see in that slide are nothing new to those producers that are on the line, and for those people who work in the pest management vertebrate pest area. The impacts of sheep and cattle by wild dogs and dingoes and their hybrids are very significant. However, they may also be caused by roaming domestic dogs, and in some cases the domestic dogs can have an even more severe impact on our production. Excuse me. Wild dog impacts, I guess, generate significant losses through predation and disease on agriculture. Secondary impacts are obviously welfare of livestock, economic loss for producers, and this can all lead to social problems as emotional and psychological stress, but also leads to downturns in rural communities and the lack of employment in some instances. And that is a real relevance to that central western part of Queensland at the moment, with the shearing industry obviously depleted greatly, and there's significantly less children at schools and that sort of stuff. So there's obviously there's more than just the impact on our livestock. There's also the ecological impacts. They obviously vary from direct predation on threatened species as well as competing with other native predators such as quolls and that for food. The impacts on threatened species such as koalas have been documented around the country, both in peri-urban and coastal environments, as well as in the rangelands and rural landscapes. One thing clearly identifiable of late is the impacts on the cattle industry are increasing around this country. I think it's a pretty fair statement to say. In the east of the country, obviously, the east of Queensland, wild dogs are significantly affecting cattle producers, with many being forced out of their breeding operations into fattening operations because the attacks on calves were just too great and they couldn't sustain these losses any longer, so they've had to make that business decision to do that. The impacts of wild dogs on the cattle in Northern Australia are often overlooked on those larger properties, as you know, dogs that are successful at killing calves will do so, and the carcasses are very rarely found, making it impossible to determine if cows if they're coming in dry, whether they've lost calves through predation or whether it's mismothering or other reasons. So I guess the measurement of impacts on larger production properties is very hard, but it's obviously noticeable. And obviously the animal welfare implications of wild dog attacks, I think, on livestock needs to be highlighted more throughout industry, through to government and through to our urban populations as well. We tend to, I guess those in the dog fraternity tend to need to justify our position quite a bit in controlling dogs from those who question it. But you look at the animal welfare issues, and you know, I guess there's two photos on the screen there that are really quite mild compared to some. But we need to really promote that a lot more in regards to why we are doing this. The next slide I just wanted to briefly touch on. I won't get into the finer details of this study, but AgForce put together a survey in 2008, 2009, and found that the cost of wild dogs in the Queensland grazing industry was about $67 million. Being in 2008 and 9, you could nearly guarantee that that number would be significantly higher now. But look, this was at the time one of the most comprehensive producer surveys available, with 280 producers taking part in that. The cost for the cattle industry, as you can see, was much higher than for small stocks such as sheep and goats, at nearly 40 million compared to 20 million for the sheep and goat industry. Predation on calves alone was estimated to be at around $23 million, while impacts at the sale yards and processing floor was over $1 million. So I guess that's all I sort of really wanted to discuss in regards to the study, but it just highlights that, you know, it is not just a sheep problem anymore. The sheep and cattle industry are really being affected by wild dog predation and those ongoing issues in regards to, you know, predation as well as disease. So I guess I just wanted to touch on the hybridisation issue because it is a hot topic across the state with producers at the moment, and has been for quite a while. And I guess I just wanted to touch on a few issues that we are coming across that we're all learning from people out on the ground. And I guess that first picture there on the screen is what the traditional dingo type dog that everybody, you say dingo or wild dog, that is the picture that 99% of people will have in their head. But I guess I just wanted to highlight what we're starting to see in the environment now. Well, not starting, it has been obviously in the environment for quite a while, but it's just something that we need to touch on and really, I guess, make people understand. So the next slide just demonstrates, we've got a picture of 4 dogs here. I'd just like to obviously start at the top left. I guess what we're trying to demonstrate here is visually what a dog looks like is really not a clear indication of genetics. And the dog on the top left was captured in the Charleville region in southwest Queensland, and a DNA sample was taken, obviously, and he was rated at 60% dingo genetics. Now the dog on the top right, however, looks like something you've got out of the pound, or it's been obviously quite inbred. He's from the Blue Mountains area down in New South Wales. But he was also DNA tested, and that dog there has 70% dingo genetics in him. So what we're just really going on by here is, I guess there's a lot of people see a dog that's appears to be of dingo origin, that sort of stuff, and we have those issues coming up regularly. But obviously that hybridisation is really varied and happens all over the place. I guess then we move down to those two down the bottom, and we move on to the roaming domestic dogs. In some parts of peri-urban Australia and on the outskirts of towns and cities, this is quite everywhere is quite common. We also have young working dogs out there chasing stock. We have old working dogs out there causing problems that go for a bit of a jaunt every now and then. We have big dogs trapped in little dogs' bodies, I guess, looking at the lower left down there, those types of animals. I guess what we're just really trying to highlight here is, the peri-urban issue and the responsible dog ownership by dog owners is a key and essential. And then on the flip side of that, we also have the impacts of wild dogs having on these, the rural pets and obviously people's pet dogs in regards to attacks and that sort of stuff. So the changing ecology. This photo here was really to really highlight once again. This is a photo. I'll talk about the photo a little bit more later, but obviously you can see those two pups in that den there are of significant age difference. And this is part of the changing ecology that I did want to discuss today in regards to how we need to be a bit smarter, I guess, and think outside the square these days with the traditional dog structure and pack sort of starting to change. So I guess in order to look at pure dingoes exist in Australia, the Invasive Animal CRC, in cooperation with the Western Australian Department of Ag, looked at DNA of wild dog samples collected throughout the country. So as you can see in that screen there, the results showed, most of the samples collected from Eastern Australia were this map here obviously demonstrates where the samples were taken at varying levels. You can see the number of specimens and that sort of stuff demonstrated through there. There was a significant, obviously, you can see significant gaps in where those samples were taken from, but as we go to the next map, you can see that's not actually demonstrated on the map. But what we really want to highlight here is obviously the results show most samples collected from Eastern Australia were highly hybridised, so those dark blue areas you see around the coastal fringes there, definitely down in New South Wales and down in those areas. So it's no surprise that, given the dingoes have been exposed to domestic dog breeds for over 200 years in this part of the country, that's no real surprise to us. We see the levels of hybridisation vary as you move west from the east coast, with pure populations of dingoes found in the more isolated and remote parts of Central Australia and Central WA. We also see hybridisation around rural centres as wild dogs obviously adapt and become accustomed to urbanisation. Whilst individuals with relatively pure dingo genetics do occur in these dark blue areas of the map, we do need to identify that. There are few and far between, with the majority of dogs being extremely hybridised, with only 40 to 60% of the genetics being dingo and the rest being comprised of genes of domestic breeds. So it's really interesting to have that, and I guess I do want to highlight again that there is obviously, that is a very broad representation. You will get genetic variances within those areas, but it is a really good study to reference to. This is just a graphical representation of the hybridisation from that study. We won't hang on that too much longer, but you can get a fair idea of where we're at in that regard. So what does this mean? What does hybridisation of the pest? Some people might be saying, well, a dog's a dog. But I guess what it does mean is the pest species that we're trying to control is changing. We are seeing some changes. Talking with people out on the ground, we are seeing a change in the dog. Hybridisation is constantly changing the species we're trying to control, and although it's not quantified yet, monitoring of control programs and talking to more people, we're starting to build a bit of a picture. So what I was trying to demonstrate here, this is the calendar, the control calendar from the Queensland Government website from Biosecurity Queensland. What it means is this traditional, I guess, pattern we have here is starting to change. So we really can't sort of plan our control programs specifically as strictly as we used to have them. You know, we're regularly seeing wild dogs appear to be breeding throughout the year in some places, depending on season, of course. But rather than once a year in those, you know, in a highly seasonal fashion, as the traditional dingo should, it appears that multiple bitches in a pack may be producing litters rather than a single dominant female, as you would expect from purebred dingoes. That's the pack structure. Trail and remote cameras are being widely used throughout Eastern Australia for wildlife and pest management monitoring, with images of wild dog pups now being captured in nearly every month of the year. And I guess just a personal experience was in Cape York 5 to 6 weeks ago. And considering dogs are pupping earlier, several tracks spotted on roads up through there had some very, very small pups running around with those larger dogs. So we're seeing that change generally. So, so a commonly held belief, I guess, amongst some stakeholders is that wild dogs are now breeding up to twice a year due to this hybridisation, because, you know, they're seeing pups throughout the year. However, through discussions and that with a lot of professionals, it's more than likely that a hybridisation has caused the extended breeding season, with different bitches having litters throughout the year. So public, they're basically pups are travelling throughout the year, and once again, that's really highly dependent on the food source and the conditions. So what does this mean for our management? Is that 2 different ages of pups, our traditional programs aren't sufficient to reduce those impacts. Control that first litter of pups, and as they become independent, we control them as they become independent, of course. But if no control is applied after that, the next litter of pups is coming on through and starting to pull those impacts on, and we are sometimes evaluating our programs as not successful because we're seeing those pups still hanging around. So unlike in the past with our dingo job, where we could apply 2 coordinated control programs throughout the year and control dogs before breeding and then a second one to control the pups. In this case, the first litter, we now have to look at applying control throughout the year to ensure that we are controlling that second litter and his mates before and after and everyone else. So you'll hear me mention that several times throughout the webinar. I'm a really strong believer in this. We need to control dogs 365 days of the year now. The 2 control programs, the 2 big coordinated baiting programs, or control programs I should say, still need to occur because we still have those high peak periods in activity, but we need people to be controlling dogs throughout the year. Okay.
Okay, so we'll pause for questions there. Thanks, Brett. So, folks, if you've got a question or a comment, just type them down the bottom of your floating control panel. And, Brett, the good news is we've got a few in already. So the first one is a comment. The media and city-based politicians need to better understand the difference between wild dogs and dingoes. Do you have any thoughts about how we can assist with that?
Well, look, I guess in this, industry, for want of a better word, very, very rarely do we ever use the word dingo. We refer to them as wild dogs due to that hybridisation issue that we demonstrated in that part of the talk. So, yeah, look, it is a very grey area, I guess, in regards to the dingo wild dog, and really, as far as I'm concerned, I promote whether they're a dingo or wild dog, they're still predating on your livestock and they still need to be controlled.
That's right. And one of our listeners has just commented that they both do the damage. So, yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Okay, next question is, towards the beginning you had a table showing the costs to the cattle and sheep industries from wild dog predation. Question is, how come the number was much greater for cattle producers than sheep?
To be brutally honest, I wasn't involved in the study. And I guess it was obviously representative of the number of producers that were surveyed and the amount of information that Lauren got out of producers and of obviously meatworks and those sort of places. So to be honest, I can't answer that question for you. If you would like clarification on that, I'm more than happy to refer to Lauren and find out some more details and forward that on.
Okay, thanks, Brett. And I know you'll be sharing your contact details at the end for people to follow up with you afterwards. I've just had one or two people, Brett, ask if you could speak a little bit louder, that the phone lines must be wearing a bit thin. You're clear to me, but if you can just talk a bit louder, that'd be great.
No
questions are flooding in now. So talking about hybridisation, do we get any crossing between dogs and foxes?
No, I haven't heard any reports of that. I would be very surprised if I did hear reports of that, but yeah, no, it's a pretty clear no on that one.
Okay. And one of the listeners has suggested that with the value of damage to the two industries, that it might be that it's a value of one head of cattle versus one head of sheep. So yeah, that's probably a valid suggestion. Okay, Brett, how about we call it quits there and we'll move on to the next section, because I'm conscious we're almost halfway through our time, but you've still got 3 sections to go. Yeah,
I'll try and keep it moving. So, all right. I just wanted to move, obviously, and go through the current controls, and I apologise to those who are very familiar with this, but I just really wanted to take the time and have the advantage of just going through the current control tools. I will make it obviously aware that I will be talking about, I guess, the tools and how we are using them in the context of Central Western Queensland, or Western Queensland in general, and please understand, obviously, rules and regulations in regards to some toxins change and traps change throughout the state. So I just want to obviously make people aware of that. Obviously, 1080 or sodium fluoroacetate is one of the most commonly used control techniques we have for wild dogs across the country. I guess I just wanted to really go through 1080 a bit and discuss it in regards to I guess familiarising people with you know, some of the do's and don'ts. I guess we won't get into too much detail with it. I'm assuming most people on the webinar here have used it or been in contact with it at some stage, so I won't drag this out. But I just wanted to really just go through the process for those who are not familiar with it, and just sort of go through. So I guess, what is 1080? It's a naturally occurring substance found in some native plants within Australia. It's broken down with water. So I guess as a 1080 operator, when I was several years ago, when we break down our solution strength, it's broken down with water. So it is obviously naturally occurring and broken down with water. It is biodegradable. So it is a biodegradable substance and is readily broken down into harmless compounds by bacteria in the environment and in the soil. So therefore there's no residual in the soil. Being an Australian toxin, I guess, and found in native plants, certain Australian native mammals have a natural resistance to the toxin, so that's another advantage that we have, and why I guess it's been such a successful tool for us over the years. It is relatively cheap to produce, which makes, you know, baiting is a very cost-effective tool to use. And hence, just another demonstration in that slide there. And I'd just like to highlight that statement on the left. It is the cheapest and most effective tool and target-specific tool we have for managing wild dogs on a broad scale. There are other tools available that are just as successful in a different way, but on broad-scale management, which is obviously what we're looking at in that Western Queensland country on the rangelands, baiting is one of the most, or is the most successful toxin we have. I just wanted to highlight here, this is being drawn from the 1080 manual from Biosecurity Queensland. Just the relative toxicity of 1080 in regards to, and once again I won't dwell on this. If people would like a copy of this, let us know afterwards and we can send this through. This is not, it is, you know, it's readily available on the internet. But we're just looking at, obviously the dog is the most susceptible animal we have on that page there, and it just shows a relative resistance per kilo of body weight that 1080 is. So I guess it's I guess it's one way of dispelling, some of the old myths you get around the place as well, that 1080 used to kill hawks years ago and now it doesn't. Well, if you do the calculations, a hawk cannot physically eat enough meat with 1080 to kill it, and goannas vice versa. So I won't dwell on that any longer. Just wanted to make that make people aware that that sort of stuff is available, and if you'd like more information on it, please let us know. One of the big things with 1080 baiting is obviously managing non-targets. Obviously, we want to be as target specific with our baiting programs, and there are several ways we can do that, and I just wanted to run through those, and they're listed on the left-hand side there. So obviously, the retrieval and destruction of baits where possible. Obviously, in a broad-scale rangelands situation, retrieving baits, considering we put them out of a plane, majority of the time, retrieving baits is not a viable option. But if you are target baiting around watering points and that sort of stuff where dogs are tracking, obviously retrieval and destruction of those baits is important if you want to continue to feel safe with your working dogs in the paddock or whatever the situation might be. Placement of baits and type, I won't dwell on this too much longer. As you can see in that photo on the right there, we've got a photo of 3 different bait matrix there, I guess. So we've obviously got fresh meat on the right, or dried fresh meat on the right, and 2 manufactured baits there. Tying and burying of baits allows to be more dog specific in regards to dogs can have to work harder to get that bait, and birds can't pick it up and take it away, or other animals can't grab hold of it. More is not necessarily better, and this is something we're really encouraging with in a lot of rangeland areas, especially at this point in time with the dry. Really encouraging people to be smart with their baits. There's that little water around at the moment, that least amount of water around. We know the dogs have to come to water at some stage, so being smart with your baits, and once again, bait placement and the bait type and putting in the right spot will be more effective. And I've just added that little one, leave working dogs at home and restrained. I guess I say it in a lot of presentations I give, but it's a funny one. I have had people turn up. I have had some blokes turn up to a 1080 baiting campaign with their dog in the back of the ute to come and get their meat baited up. So it seems like a bit of a no-brainer, but to some it's not. So I just thought I'd add that one in there. I'd quickly talk about trapping. Trapping is a very effective way of controlling targeted trouble dogs throughout the year. If you're having trouble picking up dogs with baits and they're continually tracking around, trapping is it's really increasing in popularity. AgForce have been running some trapping workshops across in Queensland for quite a while now, and landholders can't get enough of them. Trapping is really becoming popular again. Although it is time-consuming, it can be a very successful tool in removing difficult dogs. I just wanted to touch on a question was proposed before the webinar by an attendee in regards to the best lures to use for trapping, or the best, I guess, ways of drawing dogs into a trap. Unfortunately, look, I guess the answer, there is no one easy answer, and talking with many trappers and with my own personal experience with trapping, look, there is only the one thing you need to, I guess, highlight is what it needs is you just do whatever it takes to draw that dog to your trap and put his foot in the spot where you want it to. Obviously trappers have special concoctions of blends of glands from dogs and different organs broken down, and obviously you can commercially purchase certain things, but just as a personal experience for myself, I needed something different several months ago for trapping a dog for up north, and I used some tuna oil out of my tackle box, and that actually that trapped the dog where he wouldn't go into the traditional light type lures. So there is no one easy answer to that question, unfortunately. But look, I can say, if you've had experience with trapping obviously is something that needs to continue. Trap types have changed, as you can see on the screen there. There is that's an example of a bridger. That's a soft jaw, and once again, regulations are different throughout Australia. So please consult your local regulations in regards to trapping. We will have a little discussion about some trap stuff later, but generally that's what I wanted to say about trapping. Shooting, once again, a very brief discussion about that. Shooting is one of the tools in the toolbox. Obviously, shooting is necessary when foothold trapping dogs to destroy that dog as quickly and as humanely as possible. You know, it's an essential part of trapping. Many dogs are taken out every year by shooting, especially in the Central Western area by commercial macropod harvesters. And obviously local government bounty systems are claimed on those dogs. But generally, landholders are encouraging all their shooters to take dogs out of the system, obviously. And look, aerial shooting, I'll put that photo of a helicopter in there. Aerial shooting is another type that landholders use to address an individual sighting. There has been instances in that Central Western area where dogs are starting to encroach in areas where they've never been before, and landholders have obviously had the access to the machine as well to get up in the air and take those dogs out as quickly as possible before they can get established. Obviously, it's a very expensive method and is not regularly talked about and mentioned as best practice, but it is another option for some people. Quickly touch on guardian animals. There's several guardian animals obviously available. I've got two highlighted on the screen there, Maremas and donkeys, which are proving to be effective and very popular out in the western areas. I won't talk about too many other species around like alpacas and the likes, but I guess guardian animals are being used with success, mainly on sheep, but there are some landholders using Maremma dogs on young cattle and are seeing great success with that. I guess it's really important that we highlight here the bonding of these animals and the correct care of these animals, both donkeys and Maremmas, is essential for their success. If the work's not put in the first place, they will not work for you, and your chances of success are very, very low. So please don't expect to get half a dozen donkeys off a truck and throw them in the paddock and let them go, and they'll be happy as Larry. You do need to bond them with the animal that you're wishing for them to protect for you. And once again, there's obviously out in the community, there's obviously there's the potential there with Maremmas, with people doing the wrong thing and animal welfare issues going on in regards to that. But once again, if anyone needs any more information on guardian animals, happy to help out. And I guess the hot topic around the country, and especially in Queensland at the moment, is exclusion of fencing. A lot of sheep producers are resorting to putting a fence around their place to protect themselves from the influx of dogs, but once again, there's still the issue of controlling the dogs on the inside. So looking for that physical barrier. I won't talk too much on fence configurations, simply due to the fact configuration will change. There are some people prefer some type of fence than others, and there is no one-size-fits-all, obviously, due to landscape. And the current fence design, some people are modifying old fences and whatsoever. So what I will say, electric or hot wires are seen as critical, but on the flip side, there's they need a lot more maintenance and upkeep in regards to that. But it's just, once again, just highlighted as another tool. And that's just another photo of just another different assembly, and as you can see, there's several hot wires on there and a nice big cleared line. So exclusion fencing is just highlighted as a control tool. John, back to you.
Great, thanks, Brett. So first of all, just a few quick comments that you don't need to respond to. So there's a guy commenting that the message that you're talking about today is what they're promoting in Western Australia, especially if people run small stocks and they need to bait 52 weeks of the year.
Yep.
And he's enjoying the webinar today. Another one's commenting that some states have different regulations in regards to bait retrieval. So I guess the message is, yes, you need to just check out what's appropriate where definitely. You are located.
Yep.
Another one's commenting that they had 9 half-grown dogs shot near where they live in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So just a question for you. So what about the breeding of bait-shy dogs?
Look, to be honest, that this bait-shy dog thing is coming up more and more regularly, and I guess to wrap it up in one simple answer is no validation of that. There are people that are making statements in regards to that are unvalidated. Look, I guess there are many, and people within my roles, and some people listening here today will understand where we're coming from. It comes up very, very regularly in regards to why aren't dogs picking baits up. We're putting them out, they're not picking them up. Why are they still there? I guess our understanding of the dog is, we could probably understand a lot more about how the dog thinks. There has been obviously instances we've had cameras set up on baits and the dog walks past it 3 times and then picks up the 4th. Why did he pick it up the 4th time and not the first 3 times? So look, the bait shy dog business, look, there is no real validation of that, and I guess that is probably something that, it is coming in conversation a lot with the Western Queensland guys. But look, there is no easy answer, unfortunately.
That's okay. How long is that piece of string?
Yeah,
so
that's it. Yeah.
Can you,
yep.
Yeah. So Brett, can you comment on injecting versus rolling of baits?
Yeah, sure. I guess bait preparation. There's been a lot of focus on that, especially in Queensland of late. Generally, in the broad scale programs in the West, rolling was the chosen method of bait preparation, rolling meat in a mixer due to the volumes, due to the sheer amount of volumes. But as you saw from photos there earlier, that big long bait table there with drying baits and injecting those dry baits, that was actually from Western Australia, those photos are bought from. Look, we're really encouraging now to definitely dry baits. There's a lot of freezing of meat going on and collecting meat over a larger space of time for the big coordinated campaigns. So people are freezing the meat, so therefore they have to thaw and drain that meat so that, once again, the 1080 is not diluted by any water or blood left in that meat. So I just recommend that people really take your time with the preparation of your meat, because there's no point preparing a sublethal bait. You go to all that trouble and the dog does pick it up and doesn't get a lethal dose. Let's do it properly and take the time to get in and prepare those baits properly. On the question of rolling as per injecting, once again, it depends on the landscape as well and whether the landholder, how long he wants that to persist in the landscape. It is confirmed that injecting meat baits so that the 1080 toxin is on the inside of the bait, obviously once it dries out in the landscape, it'll turn into a jerky type bait, and it does have a longer persistence in the landscape as compared to rolling, where the 1080 solution is on the outside. So it's horses for courses, I guess, comparing rolled to injected. But I guess when we're talking about having a control tool available to dogs for as many days of the year, obviously, personally, I'd choose injection over rolling. Plus, I guess, sorry, that's just popped into my head, throughout Queensland there are different regions as well. For those in the eastern part of Queensland, injection in those more built-up areas, injection is not an option. So once again, regulations change throughout the state, so please consult your local state regulations in regard to 1080.
Right, okay. Thanks, Brett. We'll hold the questions there so you can move on to the next section.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I just want to briefly touch on upcoming vertebrate pesticides or control tools. I will say up front here, I haven't been involved in the research of these toxins or other tools, so I'm just really conveying a quick, brief message to let people know what these toxins are and give a fair indication of where they're at in regards to registration. So PAPP is the new toxin that's obviously been talked about, has been in development for quite a long time. There's a lovely big long name up there, and I'll let you all read that. But as you can see, for feral cats, dogs and foxes, and to put simply, there's obviously a longer scientific explanation of this, but basically causes rapid depletion in oxygen being carried to the brain for these dogs. So in that slide there, I'd just like to highlight obviously the pictures at the top. So the blood colour and the colour of the tongue of that dog. So you can see obviously as blood flow reduces, you can see that physically. What does this mean? Well, PAPP, we are lucky enough that PAPP does have an antidote. There is an antidote being developed and has been used. That photo of that gentleman and dog there, that dog was actually saved by methylene blue, I guess, is the antidote, which is a very regularly found substance. You know, the trademark name will be Blue Healer, I guess, and once again, Blue Healer will be available in a tablet or a suppository for. So once you saw your dog starting to get a bit sluggish, you check his tongue, it's starting to change. You know, the possibility of him picking up a PAPP bait is there. You can have, we'll have access to an antidote. So that's a real winner in the wild dog toxin world, I guess. I guess just a few extras on PAPP. You know, the mode of action, it seems to be more acceptable. As you know, once again, that depleted oxygen, the animal will basically go to sleep. So there's not the undesirables that you get with the use of 1080 and with strychnine as well. But just a warning, PAPP won't be suitable in all situations because they are having issues with. It is lethal to goannas. So there will be. You know, it's not the silver bullet that we're looking for, but it is an extra control tool, and that's what we are looking for in the landscape. So for people who are concerned about their working dogs, we'll have another option available. And just to let everybody know, PAPP won't be in a solution form like 1080 is with a fresh meat bait. It will be coming out in a manufactured bait that will look similar to the dog on bait. Well, some of you might have heard the M44 ejector, but we're calling it the Canid Ejector. I will try and explain it as best I can from those photos in front of you. It's basically, you can see the breakdown, the materials there. The long tube is the stake that is driven into the ground, or the body of the implement. It's basically a spring-loaded device that has a bait head on, and you can see in that right-hand photo the bit of the bait head on the top. That is the only part you will see above the ground. And how the ejector works, it is spring-loaded, loaded by a set of setting pliers there. And as the dog or fox pulls up, they cannot pull sideways on it and make it fire. As they pull up, the trigger is fired. A plunger will go through that little white capsule that you can see at that hand there. And there will be a lethal dose of 1080 or other toxin in there, which will inject that straight into the dog or the fox's mouth. So once again, it's another control tool, probably very similar to what you probably, you know, with a trap, you'd have them set. You have the ability to go around and remove them from the landscape if dogs aren't picking them up or the foxes aren't using them. You can go around and disarm and whatever else. I just wanted to obviously make it clear as well that there will be training involved. It appears there will be training involved when the ejector becomes available for use. They are trialling them in New South Wales parks at this stage, I have been told, where the trials have been happening, and they have had a great deal of success with them. So once again, it's just a watch this space for these new tools. And just another one that's with the invasive animal CRC currently is the lethal trap device. You can see in that photo there, the concept is obviously a tube of toxic chemical in there that once the dog, obviously to, you know, as a substitute for strychnine on traps, so that trap turns from a holding device into a killing device. So as the dog bites at that trap, he gets a lethal dose of 1080 or whatever the toxin will be in that tube. That will be commercially available as well, obviously zip tied to the trap. From discussions I've had with staff at the CRC and the researchers, they have had a few issues in regards to, I guess, the makeup of the tube in regards to its durability and effectiveness, but once again, that's basically all the information we have on that at the moment. So that was just a couple of the new tools. That was just basically an awareness for everybody to keep an eye out for. And once again, your local state governments will obviously let people know when they're available. John.
Great, thanks, Brett. So there's a person with us today from Western Australia. and the question is regarding numbers control. They're saying that they don't aerial bait due to the risk to their own working dogs. They shoot and sometimes ground bait, but they hardly see any dogs on their property, yet their neighbour, only 100 k's away, aerial baits, shoots, and the local dogger often works there. Yet he reports packs of up to 10 dogs on some of his mills. So what's going on? It seems as though his neighbour might be his biggest dog problem. Like, is there that much variability in the landscape, Brett?
Look, from discussions obviously with producers all over Queensland, it is quite a regular, I guess, example of what's just been given there. I guess there's probably 10 or 20 factors involved that we could probably talk about for another half an hour on that one example. But I guess just generally, I agree with the first part of the question in regards to explaining your control tools. You don't have to put baits out of a plane if you're living on a large place. It's, horses for courses. If people are choosing to trap intensively and hand bait in strategic areas, that's what we're encouraging. And obviously using the plane for inaccessible country where you can't physically get to, where those dog areas, key dog breeding areas and corridors are, by all means, that's where the plane should be used. On the other part of the, I guess, the comment or the question, look, it is a regular occurrence that this sort of thing happens. I guess it could be, like I said, there's a million factors we could go through. Are his neighbours controlling at the same time, or how far does the control go? Does that person need some assistance with? Obviously, they said a professional is going along there, so that, there's just so many variables, and the type of landscape as well. It might be just dog heaven for those dogs through that part of the country. So look, it's once again, it's like how long's a piece of string. There's so many variables on why that landholder's having encountering that many dogs. But yeah, look, it's a hard one to answer, I guess, and have an answer for.
Sure. And there's a comment here actually from someone else over in Western Australia, commenting that they did some work in the goldfields over there to gauge how many baits each property was putting out each year, and the figures showed most properties weren't putting out enough baits to be effective, and some of the stations on the Nullarbor were putting out 2 to 3 tonnes per year. And I guess the take-home message is that dogs need to be exposed to baits all year round. Does that sound right to you, Brett?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we get asked regularly in regards to, how much meat do I need, or that sort of stuff. And it comes back to my comment earlier in one of the first sections that more is not always better. And I guess on the flip side of the comment from WA just then is, in some areas in Queensland, there appears to be a significant amount of meat going out that could probably be utilised a bit smarter and planned a lot better, which is obviously part of my role to do that. But so yeah, look, there's a fine line to be, successful with a baiting campaign. But once again, we need to talk baiting and trapping and shooting. We need to talk all of the tools. No one tool is going to win the war for you, and you just obviously need to keep going at it. And obviously, people get to know volumes and that sort of stuff. It's an experience thing. There is no one rule. Like, there's obviously minimum standards for how many baits per kilometre out of an aeroplane and that sort of stuff that vary between states and that sort of thing. But in general, it's an experience thing, and it's getting smart with where you're putting your baits and make most use of those meat baits you're putting out. Okay.
Time is running out, so you've only got a couple of minutes, so let's go to the next section, Brett.
No worries. Look, as I said at the start, a key part of my role, or the 99% of my role, is obviously working with management groups and committees across Western Queensland, and I just really wanted to touch base on this and let those from other states that, why we're doing it and what we're doing, and where it can, and I guess how transferable it is across the country, really. The key big, I've got it in bold at the top, these committees must be led by landholders and represent by those local champions, I guess, for a little cliche word, but the local champions, a landholder that really wants to, he's proactive about dog control and he wants to involve everybody in it. And why? Because we're finding that obviously communicating with all stakeholders regarding dog control and understanding everyone's role. So the committees are there. I'll give you the Western Queensland examples, are endorsed by their local government. The Western Queensland local government shires have an allocated wild dog budget, whether that's from a levy or from local rates, but these committees make decisions on behalf of council. They're endorsed by their local government to make decisions on where that funding is spent and how it's spent. And that, to me, has been a real step forward for Western Queensland, because now the landholders, no one knows the country better than the landholders who are living on it and where the dogs are, and if they're making those key decisions, we're seeing big step forwards in control programs. The committees also obviously are led by landholders, so they collect this wild dog movement information and put it together, bring it together at a central point, and they're getting the community involvement in those broad-scale programs. So they're putting that bit of peer pressure on someone who might not be doing something, and they're witnessing, you know, the impacts. We need to really focus on, let's stop focusing on the wild dog and whether you've seen one or not. Let's have a look at the impacts. The dogs are always, unfortunately, going to be in the landscape. I will never say that we're going to get dogs out of the landscape, because that's just not realistic. But the impacts need to be minimised or reduced or totally got rid of in areas where we can, because it's the impacts on the livestock industry that is the biggest problem for producers. I've gone the wrong way. The committees really integrate and coordinate all of it. They have the ability to coordinate all of that, you know, all the techniques that we've just finished talking about. So the baiting, the trapping, and the shooting. Some committees are employing a local trapper who goes out to key hotspot areas where landholders are having trouble with a certain dog that's taking sheep or cattle, and they go out and work that. So that's those community decisions being made. They've got the opportunity to record the information for the benefit of new producers. That's one thing I'm a big fan of, is if someone, a new producer turns up and buys a place, they can find out exactly what they need to know about wild dog control in their area and who to contact. And we'll talk about that more when we get down to that lovely red line at the bottom that says management plans. But obviously the development of these groups assists with the collection of authorisations and dissemination of information and notices out there. So it's really lifted the responsibility off local government's shoulders. Local government lead a lot of the work in Queensland in regards to obviously preparing bait material and organising, because of that local government budget allocation. But it's lifted a lot of the responsibility from local government and put it back onto the landholder. And to me, it's been a very big step forward. As we see in the red writing down the bottom, I just wanted to really put that there. You must have a management plan. These committees, some people aren't a fan of planning, and I understand that. I haven't been the biggest fan of it all my life either, but I know how successful it makes things be. So management plans, wanted to quickly touch on that. The plans that I've been working through with and facilitating with several of my groups is they're very action-based. They're not a big, guffy, thick document. They are very action-based. They have measurable outcomes in them so that local government can be assured that the landholders are making a smart decision and they're getting the outcomes that they are looking for. We use the Nil Tenure Planning approach, and I'll talk briefly about that in the next slide. Obviously, maps are a key component to planning. If you don't have maps, planning is pretty fruitless, to be honest. And those plans have key contacts in there, and once again, like I said at the start, they're short and concise, and someone can pick it up within between 6 to 10 pages. None of mine are ever over 10 pages. They can get the information they need, who to contact, and what the go is in regards to hotspots in their shire. The Nil Tenure Planning process, like I said, I just wanted to touch on this. It is a nationally recognised planning process now. That's just an example with the Flinders Shire group. We utilise the satellite imaging, satellite images of properties with the boundaries removed. So we're literally looking at the landscape. The only boundary we have on the maps obviously is the local government area because we're dealing with those government areas, but all the boundaries are removed, so it's not pointing the finger at one property or the other. It's looking at the landscape and saying, well, this range country up through here is a key hotspot. We need to make sure information happens there. So we collect all that information from all stakeholders. So it's not just the landholders, it's national parks, it's mining companies, whoever those people may be. We implement that on-ground control program using all available forms of control. It's not just for baiting. I'll say it again, it's not just for baiting. It's trapping, baiting, and shoot. And then at the end, we obviously replace those boundaries on the map and determine responsibilities from there and who we need to engage. One of the, we split Flinders Shire into 4 regions, and this is one of the regions. This is of the uplands country. I just wanted to highlight there the orange areas are, excuse me, the orange areas are recognised as core breeding areas. Once again, this information has been collected from landholders. The blue areas are there are key high activity areas, and then obviously the red arrows have been identified as movement corridors, and those are usually in that downs country down the south. There is obviously drainage lines and creeks. And once again, I guess I just really want to highlight there's some significant gaps there. Your maps is only as good as the landholders you get to turn up and provide you the information, but you get the picture we're trying to build. And it is a really handy planning tool to use, and I encourage every group to use it, whether it's on an individual landholder basis as well, whether it's through a group or not. It is a very handy planning tool to utilise and really make you think about the dog and where they're coming from, what they're doing, rather than just focusing on what's happening. I just wanted to close off on some key targets, some key messages that we're really trying to push, I guess, in wild dog control in general. And you can read through those, but I will read through them. We need to make sure our control is targeted. We can't just expect these days to put baits out on the ground or throw a trap in the ground somewhere and be successful. We need to make it targeted. We need to be proactive and reactive. A lot of pest management will say proactive and not reactive. Unfortunately, with the state, with where wild dogs are at this stage, I've put that proactive and reactive. So we have our coordinated baiting campaigns, but please be aware there are going to be in-between times where dogs are going to reinfest from other areas, and reactive programs need to happen. So just be aware of that. Become familiar with the signs of dog activity. That might sound like a bit of a silly throwaway line, but in areas where dogs haven't been common, and we have come across it several times between colleagues of mine, that landholders aren't actively looking, which is the next line down as well. They're not actively looking or what to look for in regards to dog activity. And we're not just talking about noticing pad sign up the road. We're talking about marker trees and whatever else. So different signs of dog activity, and some people that haven't had exposure to dogs throughout their life aren't familiar with it. So I guess that's another avenue for people like myself to upskill those people in that sort of thing and get them thinking about dogs on a regular basis and keep an eye out. Once again, actively look. Control involving all stakeholders. Let's not just talk about the landholders. Let's talk about national parks. Like national parks in Queensland have varying involvement in what we're doing. I will say in the western part of the state where I'm working, they are very proactive and willing to participate in wild dog control programs, which is really great. But all stakeholders need to be involved. Use all forms of control. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. Bait, trap, shoot. Let's get in and use whatever tools we can to control these dogs. All year round. I don't need to push that anymore. And once again, I guess our key message line is, if you have baits on the ground, traps in the ground, and you're actively looking for dogs and taking them out when you can, eventually the pest will make the fatal mistake. He might walk past the bait 2 or 3 times, but eventually he'll give in and he'll pick it up. So be vigilant with it. It's not an easy job. Controlling dogs is not, they just seem to be keeping on coming in certain areas at the moment. But be vigilant. Use the control tools. Talk to other people. Don't be afraid to ring people and find out more information, or you're having trouble trying to get a dog into a trap, ring some people, ring myself, whatever. More than happy to help, but we're trying to get people to just actively control as often as they can and help out their neighbours. John.
That's great, thanks, Brett. Actually, can you move to your next slide, which has your contact details, so people can be looking at that. So we have run out of time, and there's a number of really good comments and questions. So there's comments about packs of wild dogs in coal mines, so packs of up to 30 in the local mines. Just wondering, you know, how can we address that? So I'll let them contact you afterwards to talk that through.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, happy to give options of how to approach that. Yeah, yep.
Right. Others are commenting about feral cats. They're just as bad. So cats and foxes are a real problem with lambs in particular. So again, I'll let them contact you afterwards.
For sure.
And then there's a few other ones there, but we've done pretty well in addressing most of the questions. So Brett, thank you for taking the time to draw this presentation together, and particularly for going a little bit out of your realm of where you're located in Central Queensland. So thanks for extending it to the broader audience of our Beef Connect webinars. So folks, the webinar today is brought to you by a partnership of Beef Central and Future Beef, and we both have websites. So there's the Beef Central one, and here is the Future Beef one. So you can come to these websites for further information. We will send you a link for an evaluation afterwards, together with a link to the recording and also all the presentation slides. So I'll send that to you in due course. But folks, thanks for coming along today. Thanks for connecting with us. And again, I'd really like to thank Brett for sharing his knowledge and insights with us today. And yeah, a big thanks to everyone for coming along today and interacting. So all the best now until we meet again. Hooroo for now.